When we think about VCs in the marketplace, there's always a topic of specialization and developing a specific industry or investment thesis expertise. And so you've been very effective with Yaletown partners at doing exactly that. You've coined a phrase, as far as I can tell, of something called intelligent industries. What do you mean by that?
Let's start at the 10,000 foot level. By 2025, there will be 75 billion devices or sensors connecting the industrial backbone, commercial backbone of the world with the internet. And all of those sensors and data points are generating all kinds of data, industrial data. And our logic was, and has been for the last decade, that if you could harness the data coming off all of those devices globally that are connected to the internet, you can do something really valuable and very intelligent with them. And thus the idea of bringing intelligence to industry, making industry more efficient.
Yeah, well, and Internet of Things is something that is a term that people are familiar with, but we haven't really seen it applied in our day-to-day lives yet. Where do you think consumers will first see Internet of Things?
Well, so consumers are seeing it today with things like smartwatches and things like that. But from our perspective, that's all great, but that's sort of the tip of the iceberg. As with any iceberg, the bulk of it is below the water. And in this case, we believe the consumer will drive all kinds of benefits by industry really using that connectivity so that the consumer experience, the end consumer experience, will be more seamless. And it could be how you interact with a business or how an industry sells cars.
Well, and on that front, you've coined a second term called climate resilient growth, and you've developed a whole investment thesis around that. And a lot of people are familiar with reducing consumption of energy, but you've actually taken a broader view on it.
A natural byproduct of the intelligent industry is if you can harness all of this data, you can now use algorithms and other tools, say for a company or an industry, to be better able to not just manage energy, but input costs. In terms of how to use materials, how to use them better, how to avoid waste, how to better reuse that waste, but do it in a far more intelligent fashion. And our logic was, if you can do that, you can drive efficiency in the company, which makes company officials very happy, but you can also drive climate resilient growth because you're really decarbonizing in the process. You're doing more with less.
And less inputs obviously means really good news from a climate perspective, but a cost perspective and efficiencies, and just small percentage points can make a huge difference on the bottom line. Mm-hmm. But as a CEO, it's not something that would necessarily occur to a CEO, as something to pursue. So how do you go through that educational process to get someone focused on it?
Well, I think the price of carbon issue is now front and center, and it'll continue to be. Whether you agree or disagree with the policy around it, it is a global issue. And so there aren't too many CEOs over the coming years who won't be aware of it, particularly in the industrial setting. And then there'll be the consumer sort of saying, I like your product, but what are you doing for the environment? And I think if you can show the straight line between we've produced this good, which you've always loved, but now we produce the same good with less material or with better usage of energy behind its production to make it more efficient, I think that'll be more delightful for that particular brand and for the customer that buys from that brand. So I think we're connecting both. And a good example, just to sort of step back for a second, one of our sort of real recent wins was a company called Bitstew Systems, which is based here in Vancouver. It's a company that most people wouldn't have heard of, but if you think about what it does, it was all about energy optimization on the grid. At least that was the initial use case. How do you better manage energy on the grid for a utility to save energy sort of centrally being produced, which is really impactful. But if you look at where that technology is now within GE, it's in all kinds of industrial applications, all driving climate resilient growth within those verticals, from manufacturing to shipping, how do you better utilize fuel, and so on.
How much has your operating history given you credibility with not just the CEOs you're investing in, but also your syndicate partners?
Being an operator, as you've been very successfully, Tony, there's lots of scar tissue that comes with it. And part of what I wanted to do in this sort of next chapter in my life, not being on the operating side, has been to really utilize all of that scar tissue and network. And since I spent a considerable amount of time overseas, really bringing some of those sales and marketing and other experiences back to Canada. And we've been really fortunate. If you think about the folks we've syndicated with, Bitstew is a good example. Folks like Cisco in Silicon Valley, General Electric, and obviously BDC, which has been a terrific syndicate partner, which is really supporting a Canadian GP, supporting a Canadian company, and having a huge outcome.